Good day, my friends. We'll continue our story of the conquests of Genghis Khan. Today we will talk about the capture the Mongols of Central Asia, as in 1215, after the defeat empire of the Jin. Genghis Khan returned to the Mongolian steppe, usually say that after that, he immediately began to prepare the conqueror's campaign in the west, and all that he had going to take over the world. One of our great experts on China, Kochanov, wrote a book which is called The Life of Genghis Khan. Thinking to conquer the world, I never thought sitting in the Georgian sky sells Genghis Khan. That he was going to conquer the world is oddly not he thought about it. And after returning from the defeated Beijing, quite simply became stronger, and Mongolia after the defeat of the empire of Jin. Did Genghis Khan stronger? No. He was not, as he had about 100,000 Mongolian warriors, and he remained more than him to take them was nowhere, of course joined any different squad. Collaborators in China, but after the war in China and in 1215 not over there, was left to Vice-King Idiot and Lebanon State, one of the best generals of Genghis Khan. To first fly with him was 10,000 Mongolian warriors. Later, that number had increased to 23. Move away for the Yellow River began to collect the power in his fist, and fiercely resisted. China continued to fight and absorb all new power bank though. And the same thing will happen during the Second World War with the Japanese. It would seem that's what they all won't really just stuck in this, but that China is a huge country. Her strength was enormous, even after all of crushing defeats of the Empire Jin. She was still more than a formidable opponent, and still surpassed Genghis Khan's army, at least in numbers, although not in combat power. Eventually remained 23,000 Mongol soldiers out of 95,000 that Genghis Khan had at his disposal, but he also joined Chinese troops there, as well as various local collaborators. Chinese generals joined him in large numbers. Even Georgian troops went over to his side. There were up to 70,000 soldiers there, but there were few servers of the Chinese Jin Empire. There were still more troops in Ulu. There were many fortresses. Mahulay was stuck in northern China for a long time. Reinforcements had to be sent there. That is, Genghis Khan actually had his capabilities reduced after the defeat of the Grey and China Streamer. Whether he was ready for war in the West. But no, Genghis Khan aspired and dreamed of conquering China. This is his dream. It was because it was a great dream to what the manager and nobody in of life. The history is not captured the whole of China. Genghis Khan dreamed ready for it. He was eventually caused personal revenge Georgie him, for his killed by the Tatars of the Room, James, whom the emperor of the father, but also for all those trips to the steppe. Is that Georgie didn't commit the Mongols, it was like a blood vendetta from Jays. It was such national the feud, then as if everything was clear. Genghis Khan wanted the defeat of the conquest of the whale, the nose of China. They very like Chinese climates, seemed to him too hot during the two hottest months of the summer. He could not withstand heat in Chinese northern China where Beijing. He departed from Beijing in the Mongolian steppe there to the lakes to the Gobi Desert. Here at the border desert lake Inner Mongolia there Chinese in the Chinese heat. Genghis Khan waited during their summer trips to China in the south. Further he walked, and when Mongol will go, there will be big problems. Mongolian cavalry farther south. They will deepen the harder it would be to feed the horses. And the horses harder to survive there to just the climate is not suitable things. Were horses in southern China was found not live, and so Kuth did not like him, but what to do with it he didn't know. And the problem of control captured the Chinese territories of Kazis is infinite. Wasn't what I was telling you how, or just the sight said of Genghis Khan, will not destroy the Chinese. Yeah, it was. But that them to do next and how to organize it all when Genghis Khan. But this problem has not been solved. Mongol Empire fed war, and one war with China could feed production. There was a colossal, so when Genghis Khan Mongol there fought all the time, but to win by the end they too could not. In the Bird of Paradise was too great, and he the movies He was not up to the war in the west, did not want entry of the war, and entered into negotiations with the ruler of Khwarezm Muhammad of Khwarezm, ruler, and the Muslim the great power, which originated in Mather Shiz the Barm, the area between the Sia Darya and Amu Darya in the early 13th century, and the fact that to establish mutually beneficial trading relations trade along the Silk Road. It was great, and it was also one of the sources which could support the existence of the Mongol Empire. Genghis Khan so sent embassies to Bukhara. Khwarezm Shah have to agree with him on trade, and Khwarezm Shah corresponds to sent their ambassadors to Mongolia. And Genghis Khan ordered show them occupied northern China, it all here pray full power Mongolian. The army started negotiations, but I was ready to trade. He set up a huge caravan in Khwarezm, and he sent messages to Khwarezm Shah Muhammad, saying that I am the ruler of the east and the ruler of the west. We should be friends and trade. There were no questions asked, but nothing happened. Why is this happening? The racial theory was peculiar. The more outdated he became, the more he fell into it. He believed that the Mongols were the most chosen people, that they were all so outstanding by blood, that the Mongolian girls were beautiful without any jewelry, and the Mongolian boys didn't even teach them anything. They were smart and brave, and anyway, the golden mouth of his own mouth was this is the focus of talents because everything is inherited. This is the ancestral consciousness that was very characteristic of the nomads of the steppe. Genghis Khan may have had nowhere to touch. I could not get rid of it. He was an illiterate shepherd who had never studied anything, and absorbed it all with his mother's milk. Therefore, he sincerely believed that everything was inherited. He is the great Genghis Khan, which means his children will be great too. So his mouth was proclaimed the Golden Family and is still called that in all Mongolian legends. In all this mythology, the golden mouth of Genghis Khan and only outstanding people should be born there, Mongols. They are respectively above all people on earth, and everyone else there is meant to serve these. I can say that this is a bit of a Russian theory, quite naturally from the mouth of an illiterate nomad who lived and was brought up in tribal relations and won such a crushing victory, that had rightly been considered a son of the sky and the lord of all people on earth. But here it is accordingly Khwarezm Shah absolutely sparks spread. It really wanted to trade with Khwarezm Shahs. He sent a huge caravan of 500 camels to put all my operating cash literally devastated, but I don't know what the sellers. That he was not in a yurt on the general yurt emptied, and all of this was sent to the west to trade. Because he had to be organized trade along the Silk Road was one of the tasks. It is a war for which it was supported. Yiger merchants well, not wanted now this way earned caravan arrived Vatra well. Imagine yourself an edge city, a huge caravan, and their drovers were naturally a Mongol could send the Genghis Khan of the Mongols, else. Besides his personal and choral, of course, it was the warriors. Because let me remind you that every grill was a warrior of note. In fact, here's a horde which prowling everywhere their post, they clearly bearing they have a military. That is what they are, their merchants. You can see at once that the soldiers of the local garrison, Commander and Nauchik Erhan took them as spies on the one hand, and on the other wealth, which was given this caravan, is so lit his greed. In this feudal state Khwarezm Shah's the power was so fragile that the local governor was autocratic, but he ordered to kill them all, and in from the caravan rally was destroyed. But even before that there was a very interesting event. In the exchange embassy ambassadors, donkeys and Khwarezm Shah in China was, and they all saw it was filled with awareness. How big of Genghis Khan's strong Mongol army saw the defeat of the Great China by the Mongols, and they went back to Bukhara, the capital of Khwarezm Shah, to tell him that not you have to fight Genghis Khan, that he is too strong. Better to be friends with him. The other side Khwarezm Shah faced with the advanced troops of Genghis Khan, who went to the west in pursuit of the old enemies of the Mongol name and Norman prince. a bunch of onions, that after the defeat of his father Dayan Khan 1204 for continued resistance, he fled to the west between Khwarezm and Mongolia was the so-called Karakitan Khanate. And this fugitive from Mongolia, he pulled this unfortunate state in the war and Khwarezm Shahs of Gislam, and sucked by their own stupidity when he arrived at the court of the offset of this Chinese pair. The blame lived the ear that mountains hone. He was a peaceful man, drink wine, not a fan of the war. He gained his simple embrace mature, to feed the heat gave the palace, was married to his daughter, and even allowed him to gain his personal squad. And this Kahunku Naaman sky began to flock, all dissatisfied with the rule of Genghis Khan of the steppe, and there remained quite a lot. And soon it was already a squad of 8,000 soldiers, Naaman stores and other Mongols, who did not want to serve. It became Genghis Khan caused the voltage. Already insertion of Genghis Khan through his spies of course followed all what happens on the border here in 1213, and then Kukup collecting this army has not found anything the best how to raise a rebellion against the Genghis Khan, to overthrow him, to seize power in Chinese, keep the rebellion. The coup failed because he lived the year almost broke all of the rebels, but then Kukup took his treasure and without money, no one to fight, and did not want even more shopping, sovereign shopping. But the way and the troops surrendered his carved rubber, which was put under house arrest, and became instead to take control of this unhappy held, but learning about what is happening in the Chinese power. Khwarezm Shah Muhammad, old enemy of the state. They were their old trowel with the 12th century when it held a rise, and offset of China defeated the Seljuks in 1143, which means Khwarezm Shah considered themselves the heirs of the great Seljuk. He attacked as the Chinese hold in Central Asia, and took them their holds, almost half of the country's. Words that I have you killed your favorite Savras of Bellamore, let me give you 1,000 of these. To it great Kogan give, and Genghis Khan a Mongol like a true horse lover. So he moved to really loved horses, he forgot about all his jealous suspicion and jabs, only got rewards for conquest of Jungaria Kashgar. However, protection trashed its kept the Khitan, and it turned out that one side of the Khwarezm Shah Muhammad and another Genghis Khan themselves, especially the reluctance, came toward each other. They're bound. Aries agreed Tien Shen here and started all these negotiations, trade, and Genghis Khan sent Khwarezm Shah Muhammad gold ingot and the size of a camel's head captured in China in a sign that how would you want to trade? He really wanted to sell between, and his soldiers with the caravan came well clear follow him to send it, but traders Mongol. She has only the Mongol, they could all wars well. Where he has to he will send, even more to guard your own with the hook of his wars here. But in the first cultural differences Muhammad only one did not understand that Genghis Khan is valid in its worldview quite sincerely to establish good neighborly relations. In the second greed edge ruler and Nauchik Cairo Khan led to the fact that the caravan from Rory was looted, killed, all of his caravan soldiers were killed, except for one who hid in a bathhouse, washed in a bathhouse while his comrade was being slaughtered, climbed behind the stove, hid there, then holed up for 3 days, then barely escaped from the city, barely reached Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan showed amazing restraint. Sometimes it is said that if there are murderers of ambassadors, the Mongol immediately started this war with no. Genghis Khan showed amazing restraint. The house did not start a war, it did not want this war. It was in China for wait. It wanted to continue to conquer China. It was not up to the West. And it sent well, where to go in general, a terrible crime. He sent another embassy to Khwarezm Shah Muhammad. The embassy this time was without any speeches, that I was there. Water to the east of and water to the west. Let's be friends, nothing like that. Everything was clear, short, concise. There was only one phrase. You return Cairo Khan, give out such a dagger blade. Imagine this Khwarezm Shah, who was used to the gala speech style of the East, got so used to it that his ambassadors who returned from Genghis Khan and brought him a little earlier. Gave him the glory of Genghis Khan that you are the Lord of the West, the Lord of the East. Let's be friends. They did not convey it as he said. It was even customary to say everything beautifully decorated, to speak there verbally. To weave lace. They told him this in such a way because as I am Genghis Khan, the Lord of the rising sun. So you are the Khwarezm Shah of Muhammad. This is the Lord of his sunset. And this was the meaning of another sunset. I am the rising star and you are the setting sun. As the West, you are falling. Khwarezm Shah was also offended then. And then you realize how the blade of the dagger of demand is undisguised. Khwarezm Shah became enraged. He ordered the murder of a Muslim ambassador. Muslim as a merchant Genghis Khan sent to Muhammad. The Mongols, who were with him, had their beards singed into Mongolian ones. These pathetic little beards, nevertheless they were singed, they were flogged, they were stripped and thrown naked abroad, and so that they could get to Genghis Khan as they wanted. They did not get to the Mongol outposts with great difficulty. They were brought to Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan saw all this, and after that the war began, and again. He first sent Muhammad to tell him, I am coming against you with an army that you will not be able to repel. Prepare for your entourage. When he saw the disfigured ambassadors, he declared that this was not the sovereign. This was a bandit. He climbed the mountain, bore hold and prayed. Toa descended, announced that there would be victory and there would be war, and began to prepare for this. In fact, this war was, and they also did not need a heavy one for the Mongols. Since 23,000 since the 95th had been occupied in China. The actual Mongolian troops had to leave 20,000 in Mongolia itself, since it was also restless in the north at that time, thanks to the greed of the Mongolian regions. A war broke out with the Khwarezm from Kanami Kura with the ancestors of the Yakuts. And in general, everything was difficult in Siberia. Therefore, Genghis Khan really had only about 50,000 Mongol warriors, and that was it. But of course he began to call for allies. He recognized that he had called the Uyghurs, he had called the Kalaks, the Gudas, but the Tangut Burkhan, who knew something, boldly replied to him, if you don't have enough warriors, then some Kagan and didn't come from Genghis Khan, then he will remember. But until he was ready there, he went to war to the west. He gathered all the local tribes that could be included in the auxiliary troops. These are there and Subodai Bogota, who began to form Subodai Bogota by the way, and made this post in 1217. Volume 1. One topic was formed after he finished off Merkel's markets and continued to resist by leaving for Kazakhstan. But already here they could not do anything. They were overtaken, defeated, destroyed the entire people, the entire horde of them, and the remnants were included, along with the remnants Naimanov and the local Turks here are in the first Mongolian. Then we are somewhere, but not a definite particular believes that 10-0 actually there, as well as the Tumans of the Mongols, have always been undetermined in numbers. And at home, the analogue of the Tumans is only worth auxiliary detachments. 2 was an indefinite number of 6, 7, 10, could even be 13. Well, it's about. He gathered some more forces of the Mongolian troop, and we'll kill them. Well, he could get a maximum of thousands in all. His cause stretched from Astana to the current Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in China. On this huge front, he had 100,000 of them, which is very small, but not just wasn't anymore. But how many Khwarezm Shah had? Sources write about 400,000 of course. This is absolutely impossible because if we are talking about China, that there was a bureaucracy and a ministry on the list of those receiving rations. As if there were one level of stories about the Mongols. We say there is a list of thousands of Genghis Khan and 95,000 nicknames. He assigned everything to the level of detail there, which is clearly confirmed by the Chinese history of the Yuan dynasty, the Mongolian Yuan dynasty too. All this is carried out and, when we are dealing with Khwarezm Shahs. There are just some Muslim historians who write Quran. How could they know what? It's just one. It is like how many Moors died in the Battle of Solo, up to 400,000 people, according to Christian sources, and why 4,000 and why feel sorry for them. Then write more. As you said, Suvorov is knocking on the Empress's door and making reports to Empress Catherine on the victory over the Turks. Nonsense. Or write more here. Of course, absolutely left figures. Historians believe that despite what kept Khwarezm Shah was a populous country, with agriculture and a complex irrigation system that allowed to harvest large harvests. And there really were a lot of people living there, but still significantly fewer than in China. If China had cities of 1 million people, Juna had 1 million city and or a typhoon. Then it was deep and 1 million city, then the largest cities of Central Asia. Then 100,000 people, Samarkand 100,000, Urgench 100,000. Well, by the way, Paris was at that time, the time is the 30s. The inhabitants are somewhere in Q70, maybe thousands at most. That is, they set the figure for themselves and, accordingly, the size and troops of even all the troops that Khwarezm Shah Muhammad could theoretically assemble. Of course, he was not so big, but it is obvious that he had more soldiers than Genghis Khan Pegasus. She was less soldiers, and what does Khwarezm Shah do knowing that a mobile army is marching on him? The nomad thinks Genghis Khan is an ordinary nomad. He is doing exactly the same what to do any ruler of a civilized right side. Puts a fortress on the border with strong garrisons, think that the nomads will not take them quickly and he can come to their aid. The main forces gather. Strategic reserve here, in this case in Samarkand. This reserve was to meet to break through the line of fortifications, separate Mongolian troops to smash them, and then go to the aid of frontier troops as normal, where he knew how. Come Genghis Khan, no one knows that Roman emperors did not know where the barbarians come, therefore was weather miss and mobile army commentator limit on old manly mission commentators. Mobile troops stood there somewhere in the border towns over the boundary line under the fact that it was possible to reach this limit. Constantinople, there Argentorate some and so on. Here in Russian it was the same. There is a line at Okyo troops in Moscow until the top this forest through the club. You can determine where they are already there, being transferred. Attaching the Chinese were such a system with the Great Wall, and so on. Khwarezm Shah's just was not yet permanent line of fortifications, was a separate but powerful the fortress that is the border troops on the Sir Daria Rose Reserve. Physically Samarkand and rare thumps a reasonable allocation of forces, making by exit strikes at Uttira poison resist 5 months. And now Khan desperately defending the fortress, but in the end, suddenly it turns out that the Mongols, excellent gunners from China and against the Chinese name, have built of raw brick walls with not a hell of fortresses, and they do not stand up. And after a 5-month battle, Uttira bribe, Orhan resisted to the last. He fought in the citadel, it in the end captured, dragged Genghis Khan commanded him. Pour silver in their ears and in my mouth, you robbed my merchants. Wanted treasures, get drunk with this treasure of the city was destroyed, slain. He has since revived the evil town, because evil the ruler of what the governor and the people of this. What is the parish priest of all? It is necessary to destroy the well to make forget that the Mongols' tactics of information strongly horror just dropped to paralyze the will. Enemy resistance resisted from October to count for the month of February, almost January, but until now it was the defense of Uttira. Genghis Khan did not take active actions. He waited to see what will be done. Mohammed did not do anything. He was waiting for the development of events in his hand, sitting in Samarkand. And then Genghis Khan made absolutely brilliant maneuver. February, months of January. In the end, Jan with his main forces moved through the Kizilkum Desert and all of a sudden appeared in the rear of Khwarezm in Bukhara. He repeated the maneuver which he made when passing through the Gobi Desert, beating the Great Wall of China. Here Eugene was the same thing. He bypassed border fortifications. Khwarezm crossed the desert, which we pass, and in early February, the month, and Gabi too. I was in Fergana to Tashkent in the spring, the month of February in Tashkent. IV in Fergana goes jackets this spring, and there have not yet had time to put the snow accordingly. The water, well, that is, it melted, but Merv passed by, then decided that we were waiting for 100 reports, and raised an uprising. Killed the Mongol governor of the road, who sent jabs and separated, and after that, Tahu Chao began there. He would come to besiege this world. The city would be taken, and as all Arab sources write, there would be no one left, not even a dog that would lay, because the Mongols would kill everyone, and then, when they leave a grabber for the city of Dubai, that someone can hide. A special squad will allocate a Zonda team that will return to the ashes and come out of hiding. Their people had killed anyone at all. Don't leave us, but the truth. 6 months in this city, where even the dogs suddenly shot 10,000 soldiers, again rebelled against the Mongols. Now this is the validity of posts. And Olga Grey hate the Mongols from the star of the Mongols, but again will not get tired. Reminds that the Mongols themselves, this legend has spread, and it was important to paralyze the will to resist is often. It was possible to tell such a story in one of the village. Drove one of Asid villages, stopped Mongolian warrior here. And there were about 40 men, he told them, to tie each other, and when they tied it at all, killed with one or another case. When the Mongols plundered the village, was missing so much good that it's somewhere left. And lugged all this stuff to yourself to horses, to load on his second horse, and then met some breathing armed. He sternly yelled at it. Vedic Hanina told him to lie down and wait until he comes back. He lay throwing weapons, and went to lay, feared to utter a word for as long as Mongol not dragged its award-winning welcome to the horse to load, took his sword back, and killed this weak Canaan. Then was not just a farmer's, even. What this is, the lower part is not the same as here now. Navy cows there is such here that could be built already, not as in the Sasanian, informed the yard, but not a slave. So it was not a simple person. Horror worked well, and overall job is collect chased Khwarezm Shahs. They ran, dodged around Iran. One funny incident was when Jeb still caught up. Khwarezm Shah saw a caravan of refugees, but did not realize that it Khwarezm Shah. He just decided, which is obviously some kind of a crowd of beggars, and ordered his soldiers to release a chaotic cloud of arrows. One of the arrows wounded the horse of Khwarezm, those in different directions, and fled. Khwarezm Shah on the bloody horse galloped. Poor noble, since pulled your stupid meaningless host the nearest gate of the fortress where Khwarezm Shah and saved. Shot all this running around the fact that we observe lose Khwarezm Shah and leave your famous western raid. Khwarezm Shah run away to escape from the Mongols on a deserted island Abyss Kun, Caspian Sea, where he will die from pneumonia or dysentery, and so make quite another that he will wrap to bury it directly in Zara clothes in the sand. Then Jalaluddin his son would dig bury male, but the Mongols learned ruined a grave. And then, still outraged over the ashes of this accident, was the last ruler Khwarezm, the at least before his death. Muhammad Ali I was able to make one good decision. He once Din appointed heir of his power, before the Queen of Turkan Khatun forced him to change the order of succession, and to transfer power to his son from Kipchak Sky. Portrait and Agras Shah. This senseless boy Aslan Shah was now deprived of the inheritance, wanted Din back, and Jalal single-headed the Turkmen troops marched into Afghanistan to collect new troops to oppose to fight the Mongols. He was determined to fight until recently. He didn't want to give up what was happening at this time. Turgan, then where was the Queen Mother, took on a Hut Turks, and their first with the work belonged to the Mongols. Believe that they wild barbarians, dirty dogs, they all will be gone as soon as on the border, and will feel their bellies prey. But when they are gone, she got scared and ran away from Urgench, leaving the city in the lurch. ran it into one of the castles in the foothills of the Kopdake mountains, where she caught the Mongols, and they laid siege to the fortress. And it so happened that 40 days there was no rain, and the castle was water. And all the water that is collected in such well on top in the rain tattoo Tankard drained, all the water ran out, and Turas Khatun gave up when she gave up on next day. It was raining, but it was too late, and bring her back to the Genghis Khan one. It'll be fun for her arrogance, and it tells the rags to drag with a rope on the neck in front of the army, so she yelled, and the death of Khwarezm. For all to see here, this is the former queen of all women in the world of Turkan Khatun. Here's what happened, that's how it is with all who resists Genghis Khan, and Urgench were osses, and it tells the rags to drag with a rope on the neck in front of the army, so she yelled, and the death of Khwarezm. For all to see here, this is the former queen of all women in the world of Turkan Khatun. Here's what happened, that's how it is with all who resists Genghis Khan, and Urgench were os. They quarreled among themselves that the Mongols could not do anything against Urgench, who was desperately defending himself. It got to the point that Joe and we were preparing a fight, which was not just themselves, but their detachments only fought with each other. They arranged such a duel, which meant that the army did not leave each other in front of the army. The army also began to mutter each other, and then Barchik galloped up, which began to whip. He yelled at everyone with a whip that he had Genghis Khan's label on the supreme command. Deprived of everyone, he would order to execute me. Here I have a finger with a tiger's head. Whoever does not obey, I will kill him. With great difficulty, Genghis separated the fighting. He became enraged by this. This is his young wife, Mir Kidkaholan Khatun, who took them during the defeat of Murkit. There was such a beautiful girl in the last camp that Genghis Khan made a wife of himself. She was very smart, and she became a beloved woman of the emperor's new age. Here you take a young beauty, Bati, whom he once loved. She became fat, but she no longer felt feelings for her, but he did not respect. But as if already the sex was long gone, so a young girl knew to hear recently of history in St. Petersburg. What shows how older men are greedy for young beauties, and therefore of Genghis Khan. And the love she was tricky strove his minor son plastic bags to move in the airs. Francisco was not treated, but the entreaties of his beloved wife that it's time at the start to appoint a successor. His heart sank after this fight. Joe cleaning, cooking under Urgench. He has appointed heir of his third son of Chagatai. Guess which I loved. Where this happy Juice offended, but no one pay attention. Guess came with 20,000 reinforcements, took the power of a friend. Does their hands garden went much better there. The problem was the fact that the source of stone and the walls were thick, and flamethrower machine nothing to do with him, nor could they, the Chinese. The Mongols not found anything the best how to cut down all the mulberry trees in the area. Urgench mulberry wood is such that they have a very strong soak the wood in water, and then incentive rushed on the walls anyway. And even these mulberry logs do not like would not help. Then creed and ordered to dam to break down, fly to break the dam, which provided a day Khwarezm oasis irrigation, and spray it down new money, and the walls were blurred. After that, Urgench fell, but the consequences of acts they are still affected. You glare the camp because those ancient field, which was in the 13th century, then they never install, and Kiev is now located almost in the desert, and before that, it was a center of agriculture, irrigation. Urgench by Eva all decayed, but he too was not to the end destroyed again. And there was terrible slaughter, dozens, also thousands were killed. But Urgench then another with Tamerlane to fight and resist them over Tamerlane. It will finish in the 14th century, is not so. Genghis Khan destroyed everything, and then there is nothing more times than you will burst. It was a huge growth. There was a terrible Genghis Khan deliberately pursued a policy of mass terror to secure victory. But he was massive, but not meaningless. In short, the whole of Central Asia was in 1220 conquered. After death, Khwarezm Shah Muhammad seemed not left power to resist the Mongols. But his bravest of Angel Li Din raised the banner of resistance in Afghanistan, and there began to flock to him the war of different tribes that have not wanted to obey Genghis Khan first of all. It was Turkmens, but also local Afghans. They then were already formidable fighters, who did not want anyone at all to obey, and there he gathered a large army. And one of the buildings the Mongols, who were sent in Dogonku, broke it. Was the first victory over by the Mongols in the battlefield during the war, and she stirred up the whole Khwarezm East after that. Valid thundered throughout the Islamic world as the defender of the faith, and Genghis Khan began to pull it scattered throughout the power of Khwarezm troops into a single fist, and went personally against wanted Din and taught Lady of Khwarezm Shah's power. She such power, why not do a loose feudal power disputes began between the commanders who were there more merit. Was holding someone more valuable. History of mother quarreled Afghans, Turkmen and Afghan walked and wanted. One was pressed. Genghis Khan kindled. There was a battle, a fierce battle, that ended with the fact that the Mongols, spared Jalal-ud-Din troops, surrounded him. He broke through to the river, made heroic leap on his steed in the current rapidly into steep cliff to swim out the other side of the river. Shook out Genghis Khan, who was looking at him with his shore, and rode in the Indian Muslim state in the delay of the sky. The Sultanate affairs Sultan sheltered him on a while, and then he still will be a long war with the Mongols. It is also from India, so runs on the Middle East, and it will be another story. And they are, I will tell in due time, with the disc located on the banks of the Indus. To India went there. It was very hot, approaching the rainy season. The Mongols, their communities felt more like the Arno. Genghis Khan did not like the heat, so he turned back from the Indus River in Mongolia. The Great Genghis Khan campaign, and to the west over me raid Sabotage GNB only.